Hey, everybody, and welcome to Got Your Back NHL edition. We will get to our regularly scheduled podcast in just a moment. One that, by the way, Mike Johnson will be hosting because, as you might be able to tell, I'm a little under the weather right now. But before we roll the podcast that we taped earlier today, a couple of pieces of breaking news. Just wanted to acknowledge, we're not going to go into them in depth on the podcast because we taped before they hit, but couple pieces of news here. Robin Doolittle from the Globe and Mail reporting that 5 members of the 2018 World Junior Hockey Team have been told to surrender to London, Ontario police to face charges of sexual assault. Now, they are reporting this, citing unnamed sources. The Globe also reporting the players who have not been charged yet have been given a set period of time to present themselves at London Police Headquarters. So again, that report from Robin Doolittle of the Globe and Mail. And then on expansion news, the Smith Entertainment Group out of Utah has formally requested that the National Hockey League initiate an expansion process with the ultimate purpose of bringing an NHL franchise to Utah. So still many, many hurdles to clear in that story, but it's one that we will certainly be hearing a lot about in the weeks and months to come. So those two stories dropping mid-morning here before we were able to tape the podcast, but Mike Johnson, Pierre LeBrun with lots of other quality information. Here's Got Your Back, NHL edition.
All right, welcome into a very special edition of Got Your Back, NHL edition. You might notice a different voice and a different face, much more pleasant in both counts. Mike Johnson along with Pierre LeBrun today. No Ryan Rishaug, finally catering to our whims, Pierre, where we get to do exactly what we want to do. And as always, this episode of Got Your Back NHL edition brought to you by Kuma Outdoor Gear. Kuma Outdoor Gear has a wide range of gear to fit all your outdoor needs, from tents, sleeping bags, travel games, pet products, and drinkware. And not to mention Shoggy's favorite, the world's first heated chair powered by Bluetooth technology, the Kuma Switchback chair. You can sit in it, use your phone to heat it up when it's getting cold, as it is everywhere in Canada right now. Kuma Outdoor Gear, experience luxury outdoors. P, we made it happen. We dropped the dead weight, and we finally have our two-man show. Are you excited for today?
Well, you notice who they asked to be the emergency host. Not me. They went to the very intelligent Mystic Mike, which was the right choice. You know what's going to happen? This is a show that's going to go in a time capsule. And this is part of history. I mean, this is the first Got Your Back without Ryan Rishaug as host. We're making history here. So just keep that in mind as we move along.
Every one of these times this comes up, I come to think of Wally Pipp, who famously lost his position to Lou Gehrig when he was not able to play one day. And 20 years later, Lou Gehrig finally missed his last game. So I'm not saying I'm Wally Pipping Shoggy, but you never, ever know, Pierre. So we'll see. We got lots to get through, lots going around the league. So let's get to the breakdown. And the breakdown brought to you by Kinprint. With over 100 years combined experience, if you can dream it, Kinprint can make it happen, providing embroidery, signage, printing, logo design. Let Kinprint help you take your brand to the next level with their high-quality top-of-the-line apparel. Kinprint can help you with promotional products to showcase your company with class. See how this local family-owned company can assist you with your needs. Visit kinprint.ca. So, Pierre, stop if we've been here before. The headline around the NHL is the Edmonton Oilers. They just won't lose. When you think about them and this run that they're on, just at first blush, what is your thoughts with now stringing off 14 straight wins?
Yeah, my first thought is how they've done it in many different ways. I mean, first of all, they've done a lot with defense and penalty kill, which is not what you first think of with this team, the way it's composed. They've done it getting contributions from throughout the lineup, which goes against the narrative that other people have for them outside their market. So there's so many things to like about what's happening right now. And they're one more win away, MJ. I know you love this stuff. From not only extending their franchise record win streak, but from tying their franchise record unbeaten streak, which of course is no longer really exists in the NHL because of the shootout. But in 84-85, they actually started the season on a 12-0-3 streak, 3 being ties, which is a franchise record unbeaten streak for the Edmonton Oilers. So weirdly enough, even though a 15-game win streak is way more impressive than a 15-game unbeaten streak, this year's Oilers would supplant both, but who knows?
Yeah, and in many ways, that's apples to apples, right?
Down.
Like 15, unbeaten to winless right now. That's apples to apples. Because you're always wondering, like, how could this possibly be better than the 80s Oilers? At any point, they must have ran off 20 in a row, but with the ties and everything else, there wasn't a winning streak. You mentioned doing it by committee because everyone just associates Edmonton's success with, of course, McDavid, Draisaitl. You can throw Hyman in there. You can throw Evan Bouchard. You do, but like the big stars. But you look at their 14 games that they've won. Been 11 different players with a game-winning and 1 game-deciding goal in a shootout. 11 different players, Pierre. This has not been the McDavid and Draisaitl show solely. So, like, I watched them play now, and you're thinking, well, we knew they were looking for probably a top 6 upgrade, and we'll get to Corey Perry in a minute. But maybe they've found their top 6 upgrade in Warren Foegele. Like, has Warren Foegele played well enough to maybe take a little pressure off Ken Holland because all of a sudden, Kane, Draisaitl, Foegele on the second line, he's producing well enough that maybe they don't have to sell the farm to go get a top 6 upgrade that might be floating out there somewhere. I've been surprised that he's been able to do it as well as he has, even though he's playing with very good players. Does his emergence change the dynamic heading towards a trade deadline, Pierre?
I mean, it might, and certainly he's always had the skating ability to fit on this team, which is part of why the Oilers went out and got him. It was always the fact that he couldn't seem to finish like a lot of players on that team. So he's showing us something different that we haven't really seen consistently before. But, I never thought that, even though, yes, I know that getting another forward was probably part of the wish list, but the priority for me, if I'm Ken Holland still, is to make sure that you feel good in net. And not in terms of Skinner. Obviously, you feel really good about what you've seen from him now for an extended period. But, Shaugger's mentioned this, in terms of knowing you don't want to run Skinner down into the ground here from here to the playoffs, which I think the Oilers felt they did last year with Skinner. And so I think the priority still, even though it's goalie voodoo these days and nothing seems to make sense, I think you got to bring in another veteran, unless the Jack Campbell comeback tour is on. That's the only other possibility. But honestly, I'd be knocking at the door of, Marc-Andre Fleury or Jake Allen or Peter Mrazek, whatever the case is. I just want someone there that in March, especially a busy month for the Oilers, Skinner's not out there every day, and he enters the playoffs in a better place, both mentally and physically, not having anything run down.
Yeah, that's an important point, though. When you think about getting an extra goalie, it's not just what if he falls in the playoffs, like getting the guy you have in a good spot for the playoffs, right? Allowing Skinner to be rested mentally, physically, emotionally, so he can take a 2-month run at this level. He's been incredible. He's been rolling along quite nicely. And you think about how dominant the Oilers have been. This hasn't been squeakers outscoring their opponents 54-23 in this 14-game run. 31 goal differential in just 14 games. They're winning by a couple night in and night out. It's been incredible for them. And the power play hasn't been clicking to the same degree that you might expect it to in this kind of run. So you put all that together, think this team is playing about as well as they possibly can, and yet they go out and add Corey Perry. So I think we know what Corey Perry can do on the ice. Like, I think we know he brings that experience. We know that he brings the grit, the jam. He can still produce and score goals. We know he could toe the line in the playoffs and get under people's skin. In the last 30 years, there's only been one Stanley Cup winner, Pierre, that has not had any Stanley Cup winners on their roster. That was 2019 Blues. Every other team has some previous Stanley Cup winner playing for them. The Oilers didn't have that. They have that now with Corey Perry. So I guess I understand why they did it, but there's always the risk of messing with a good thing when it's really good right now in Edmonton. Corey Perry planning to play, I think, on Saturday, Pierre. What do you think his impact could be for Edmonton?
Yeah, well, this goes back to, as Ken Holland spoke about himself with the media in Edmonton, that he's been after Corey Perry really from the moment he got bought out by the Anaheim Ducks a number of years ago, and just kept, missing out on all these opportunities as Corey Perry kept bouncing around from one team to another. And so sometimes as a GM, you kind of get I'm going to keep trying on this guy until the day I finally get him. So there's some of that in this, some of what you just said. I think Stanley Cup experience, although it should be pointed out that he won his cup so early in his career in 07 in Anaheim. And I bet you really Corey Perry's feeling about the cup right now is that he went to, 3 straight cup finals and lost?
Or 3 in a row, 3 different teams.
Montreal, Montreal, Tampa.
Montreal, Dallas, Tampa.
Yeah, Montreal, Dallas, Tampa, 3 in a row. That's right. Thanks for my pandemic memory coming into gear there. So he probably feels just as eager, to be honest, to win another one as far as the rest of the roster wanting to win their first one. And of course, we can't mention this without saying that there's also risk involved in this story itself. I mean, we still don't know 100% what happened in Chicago. No one involved, despite our repeated attempts, wants to confirm exactly what we think we've been told. Corey Perry, handled that on the first day at Edmonton. Doesn't want to talk about it. Ken Holland says he did as much as he can, his due diligence, although again, he doesn't know for sure either. So that's an interesting story. Same team that took a chance, completely different story, but also took a chance, PR-wise, I guess you could say, with Evander Kane. And really, that signing has not blown back on them at all since they brought him in, right? So I guess they feel emboldened that, they can take a chance that way.
On some level, Pierre, if I was a player on Edmonton, and I get confidentiality and I get not want to talk about it, certainly publicly for Corey Perry, alluding to his statement, covering everything he wants to say about it. But if I play for Edmonton, or if I'm in the organization of the Oilers, I think there would probably be some clarity offered from the organization or from Corey Perry about what happened or the degree of what happened, whatever happened, so that everybody feels comfortable about the new person in the organization, not just the players, coaching staff, training staff, management staff, anyone who's going to be around Corey Perry. I think maybe there would be some sort of conversation about, just putting people at ease that they'll feel good about who they're going to go to work with. And I get him not doing it publicly. We may never know this. I don't know exactly what happened, but I think as a teammate, I kind of would want to know so that, you feel good about who you're working with.
That's interesting. That's something you would think of that I wouldn't naturally think of, as a former player. And the other thing in all this is that Corey Perry chose the Oilers. It's not just the Oilers choosing Corey Perry.
Right.
I know that, the list of teams that initially checked in over the past month was in double digits and got whittled down because some bailed out and obviously Perry himself and his agent, Pat Morris, whittled the list down. But knowing that it was going to be a bargain basement price in a world where no one has cap room. And again, I think teams willing to deal with any potential backlash, there was sizable interest. And so it is, to me, a bit surprising that he ends up on a Canadian team, to be honest, because I think that part of this, if he wanted more privacy and people to leave him alone, boy, life would have been a little easier for playing in Florida or whatever. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Then again, I don't know what the Edmonton media can really do. They've asked, and maybe someone will try again at some point on a quiet road day where there's fewer media traveling. But I suspect the answer will continue to be the same from Corey Perry.
Yeah, they're not going to get anything there. And I don't know if he owes the media anything, but maybe his teammates is a bit different than the media. But either way, I'm sure we'll be here next week again, Pierre, talking about the Oilers and where they're at 17 games or wherever they're at, as it seems they are destined not to lose. And you start thinking about the standings. They've already passed LA. They have tons of games in hand on Vegas. And you don't want to be too bold. And as great as Vancouver's year has been, like, you almost wonder, is the top of the Pacific even in the cards? I know it's a long way to go, and at some point they will lose some games, but it's amazing how much they've climbed and how good of a position they put themselves in the rest of the year.
2-9-1 to start the year.
Wild. Firing the coach. Everything was not working. Goalies, both of them were going to the minors, and here they are, the hottest team, making some of us predicted they would win a Stanley Cup, feeling a little bit better about their choices from the preseason prediction show. So we'll see. You got a ways to go, but
the only thing I'll say too is can we stop with the U.S. Thanksgiving point of no return now with the standings? Because now with the Blues and the Oilers, and I just feel like the First of all, the calendar's changed. The season is starting later than it used to, so it doesn't even make sense anymore. We need to stop with that.
Well, I think the numbers speak to about 75% of the teams in at Thanksgiving, U.S. Thanksgiving, make it. So 12 of 16. So it can definitely happen, and the Oilers are making it happen big time. But what is one interesting dynamic as we leave the Oilers behind us is that Connor McDavid has not lit it up in this run. Yes, he's leading them in points. He got 19 points only in 14 games. You think if the Oilers win 14 in a row, McDavid might have 35 points. He's got 19 points. So your attention now turns to the Art Ross race between MacKinnon and Kucherov. McDavid 20 points behind. I don't think he's going to catch either one of these guys because they're not backing up. How do you feel about two very different players challenging for a contested scoring title? We haven't had that in a while.
Yeah, and I think like MacKinnon right now is my pick for the Hart because I think with the injuries that the Avalanche have had, I really feel he's put a lot on his plate. And you watch them play, it's as good as he's ever looked, to be honest, which is great to see because he's a guy who's battled a lot too, injury-wise. But let's not take anything away from Kucherov because similarly, the Lightning are more, as top-heavy as they've ever been during this run. You know, they don't have the same depth. They really count on him and Braden Point to keep doing what they're doing. Otherwise, they don't win games. And so from that perspective, when you think of the Hart Trophy and if you care about it, the purity of the definition and so on, MVP, I think Kucherov case is really understated. You know, he doesn't get as much mention as some of the other candidates. Yeah, really a fantastic.
Why is that, Pierre? Why do you think that is?
I don't
know.
You know,
demeanor,
winger or
style.
Is there lightning? Well, he definitely doesn't do a lot of media. You know, he there could be some lightning fatigue out there. You know, they've been near the top of the heap for a long time, and we know their stories. And it's like, unfortunately, it's sort of human nature, right? When you've had enough of that. So, but he deserves to be in that conversation. And I wouldn't forget Austin Matthews. Now he just doesn't pick up enough assists, I guess. But in terms of the Hart Trophy conversation, man, when you're scoring all your team's goals, seemingly, you got to be in there somewhere. It's unreal. And again, on a team that can't go probably a week or two without him scoring, right?
Yeah.
So again, in the MVP,
yes.
Yeah, in the MVP definition conversation, I think Matthews is building his case as well.
All right. Well, so I'll say this. Like, I think everyone very widely, publicly sort of admires how Nathan MacKinnon plays, like the physicality with how he plays. Like, we know he can score and he's a volume shooter and he skates so well, but just the intensity and physicality that really resonates with fans, media, also other players. Like, we look at Nathan MacKinnon like he's so unusual to have that much skill and play that physically hard. He's like Ovi, but almost like more polished than Ovi. Right. He didn't score like Ovi did, but like that degree of physicality. But make no mistake about it, for players, we also marvel at Kucherov. Like, for the players, they look at him like, holy Nikes. Like, the stuff he does with the puck, the way he can move it around, the shots he makes, all the million subtle plays and decisions he makes every game. As a player, like, that guy is outrageously good. And even though it doesn't look quite as intense as Nathan MacKinnon, I think to the guys he plays against, they're like, that guy is otherworldly. So not the Hart Trophy race, though, Pierre. The Art Ross, most points.
Right.
Kucherov just got to 80. Who do you think? He's slightly ahead. He's on pace for 138. MacKinnon on pace for 134. Kucherov has missed one game. If you had to handicap that, put your prognosticator Pierre hat on and say, who do you think gets it done in the end?
Whew, it's going to be close. I'm still going to go MacKinnon. I'm just envisioning him taking those sweet saucer passes from Cale Makar on the power play. And, I'm going to go MacKinnon.
See, I would go the other way. I would go Kucherov because for the same reason, the power play on Tampa, like it all runs through him and he just piles it up and he's so good at it. And I don't think it's going to change. And Colorado may be in a spot with 10 games left to say, oh, let's shave MacKinnon to 19 minutes a night from 23. Will Tampa be in that same position? I don't think so. I think Tampa will be grinding right to the end. And Kucherov, who's been here before, who's won an Art Ross, who's won a Hart, he's done this before. I think he gets it done again. But either way, it'll be nice to see a race because, I think for a guy like Nathan MacKinnon, who doesn't have the individual hardware, despite having like a Hall of Fame kind of career, I think the stuff he's obviously concerned with Stanley Cups, but like, don't you get the sense that Nathan MacKinnon also wants that individual recognition that he is also a Hart guy, an Hart Ross guy, like one of the best guys?
For sure. I mean, think about where he's from and who he trains with every summer and the conversations those two guys have. They're fans of the game and they're fans of history, especially Sidney Crosby. But all that stuff would matter to Nathan MacKinnon for sure. And, I've chatted with him many times over the years and he burns hot. I mean, his competitive level is super high as anyone in the league. So, yeah, I mean, certainly winning that cup was priority number one in his career and a huge relief. And his demeanor that night on the ice, I'll never forget. I mean, it just meant so much to him because I think he carried the burden for that franchise about wanting to win one. But it's funny that you mentioned all this, the Hart, the Art Ross. I can just see Connor McDavid saying, you guys do all that stuff. There's a trophy I'm after.
Sure.
There's a trophy I'm focused on,
Yeah, he'd gladly swap another Art Ross Hart, everything for that one Stanley Cup that both MacKinnon and Kucherov have already won. So we'll see how that shakes up. But it's fun to look at the standings and have guys jockeying back and forth, chasing a scoring title. Now, move around the league. I don't know, Pierre, if this is good news or if this is bad news. The Ottawa Senators seem to be finding something. 3-0-1 their last four. They've looked pretty good against Winnipeg, against Philly, both pretty good teams. Yes, they took care of Montreal, not such a good team. But are they sort of figuring it out? And is that even a good thing at this point in the season?
Yes, and I heard your lovely work with Brian Mudryk on the Habs region TSN telecast of that game last night. Not a good game for the home team. I guess some of Jacques Martin's instruction is finally seeping in, and I would say, yes, it is a good thing. And I'll tell you why it's a good thing. I mean, the Senators know they're out of it, but the idea of putting themselves in a better place mentally heading into camp is really important to Steve Staios and Michael Landauer. Like, Steve Staios has been on the phone looking at possibilities to bring in some, what they would call pros or veterans, more Claude Giroux types. For a reason, because they want to fix the culture there and they want to get this thing in a better place for when camp starts next year. So yeah, it might hurt their draft ranking, but how many young players can you get into that team at this point? Like, it's time to turn a corner, and I don't mind it for them. And in fact, it's the Habs that are imploding a bit now, and I'm not sure that's not a bad thing for them. I know there's some criticism now, and maybe the honeymoon's over for Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon. It's all ridiculous. They were never going to make the playoffs this year. And honestly, the Habs for a long time this year have hurt themselves for where they should be drafting come June. And maybe this is what's happening right now is actually good for them, big picture.
Yeah, and the Habs have been carried so much by their goaltending this year, which will have to be sorted out at some point. They're going to trade one of those guys. But, for Ottawa, I think you're right. If you talk to the guys, and I was around our former colleague Dave Poulin last night, and they want to win. They want to try to change the expectation and the performance and the feeling around the club, even if it costs them 3 draft slots. They don't care about that. They'd rather finish the season strong. Although I do wonder, because I've always been the mindset, and I played on teams that switch coaches in the middle of the year. Pierre, it's not that hard. Like, nothing takes that much time to figure out. Like, Jacques Martin's system, they finally got him. Like, it's been, a month. Like, nothing is that hard. So I don't necessarily buy that completely, but I do buy Shane Pinto showing up, and he's been pretty good.
Yeah.
After taking half a year off and scored his first goal against Montreal, got an assist. Great story about how his family put the countdown clocks on their phone to his first game as a family. So everyone knew that game against Philly was going to be his first one. Parents drove down from Long Island, grandparents up from Florida to watch him, support him. But maybe he's another guy that they didn't realize how much a player like him they were going to miss until they didn't have him.
I think they realized it, MJ. I think that was a big blow at the start of the year when he got suspended, because he was pretty good last year. And it's funny, when he comes back, it just feels like everything falls more into place up front for them too.
Right.
And so again, like it's not like this team is talented. It's really frustrating, to be honest, how this year has played out for all kinds of reasons. But this team, you look at what Detroit is doing. I thought that would have been Ottawa. Of course, I'm wrong. But, that was a step I thought that might be coming. But again, defensively, net minding wise, still struggles this year for that team. But it goes beyond that. I mean, it's about, we'll look back in 10 years and say, should Pierre Dorion have extended so many young players to long-term deals? Not everyone can. We talked about this, right, recently. I mean, not everyone can handle that kind of pressure, and you understand CBA-wise why you want to do it, because in a market like Ottawa, you're trying to buy UFA years and keep guys longer, and you think that the AAV will actually be a bargain in some cases as the cap goes up. But I talked about this with a GM recently from another organization, and he says they talk about it all the time internally. Not every player on the team can handle it at a young age, the 8-year extension or the 7-year extension. You give it to some guys, but I think with other guys, you got to keep them hungrier, if that makes any sense. Even if it costs you money.
Keep them on edge.
Even if it costs you money.
Yeah, that's right. But if you get better performance, it's probably money well spent. So Ottawa going the right direction. The Flames, Pierre, going in the wrong direction. They've lost 3 in a row after winning 4 in a row. Now, maybe them stubbing their toe a little bit, and there's still lots of time left, and they're kind of around the pile still. Does it make Craig Conroy's job easier? Because he's been so clear. I'm not going to let my UFA to Bs get to UFA time, which means either Tanev, Hanifin, Lindholm sign contracts, or they get dealt before the deadline. Doesn't seem like they're going to be signing contracts anytime soon. Does that make it easier? Like, if they fall a bit further out to say, okay, it's time to make some trades.
Well, it's funny. You started all this by saying, the Flames are going the wrong direction. Who are you asking that? Yeah, I think if you're asking Ryan Huska, the head coach, you'd say they're going the wrong direction. But maybe if you're asking Craig Conroy or anyone in management, secretly they're like, okay, this clarifies things for us. I mean, big picture versus the here and now, coach versus management, often different viewpoints on these things. And I think for the Flames, it would be ridiculous to not maximize asset value for those pending UFAs if you don't think you're signing them. The Hanifin thing has been interesting because they almost signed him early in the year, and then, he backed off, and then over the last month, it's like, well, they're talking again, so who knows where that ends up. And maybe there's sort of a pragmatic approach where can you sign Hanifin and then trade Tanev and Lindholm and say we're doing a bit of both? Because at the end of the day, you're not going for a full rebuild in Calgary. You can't when you have Huberdeau and Kadri signed to those contracts. You have to do a shuffle. But it's still about asset management. And, unless there's something that happens on the Lindholm front where there really hasn't been anything all year, you have to trade him at this point. Like they're not getting in.
No, and even if they got in, they're not really a threat to win a cup. They're just not there as a team. So you got to take that into consideration. Now, it seems like first rounders used to be traded at the deadline for rentals with a far greater regularity than they are now. Those are 3 pretty prominent names. Do you think like first rounders would go for Lindholm? Would you get a first rounder for Tanev, for Hanifin? And let's just assume no extension. Let's just assume they're traded as rentals, because I don't know if the rental market is going to be as robust for the sellers if they think they're going to get like what they got for Zadorov. That was it was a nice return, but it wasn't first rounder return. Like, do you think these guys will get that? Will they warrant that?
Well, Orlov went for a first last year, and so, wouldn't you have Hanifin in the same ballpark? But last year's last year. Every year the trade deadline market is its own organism that develops its own path. It's hard to compare one year to another, although the sellers and the buyers try to use that to their advantage. Ben Sherratt went for a first. David Savard went for a first. They all end up being really low first, but I'm just saying those are rental D. The thing that I brought this up in my piece to The Athletic with Kevin Cheveldayoff, we got into a bunch of different things, but he agreed to something that I've been hearing from his colleagues throughout the league over the last couple of weeks. There's this narrative taking hold, and I don't know if it's something they're talking themselves into or that they truly believe, but that this is the most wide open field it's ever been for the Stanley Cup this year. And all these NHL front offices are coming out of their pro scouting meetings. The Jets had theirs last week. And, Cheveldayoff said, because number 8 Florida last year, I said, well, is that an aberration? He goes, no. He said, there are going to be a lot of good teams losing in the first round. And he goes, there's a bunch of these teams from first to the wild card separating by a point or two. The parity's real. And so the point is, what I'm hearing from some teams is twofold. You got teams at the top that we consider at the top, right, who are saying, how much better are we really than the team we're going to play in the first round? And should we be spending a first-round pick on a rental if it's that wide open? So some of that is creeping into their thinking, although I think their competitive juices end up taking over. But then you got the bubble teams, and I'll give you Pittsburgh, MJ. I think there's some GMs on bubble teams that are thinking, man, this is wide open. If we just get in, who knows? And I understand that we've actually been saying that for years, but I don't know that people truly believed it. I think they were selling that to ownership or the fans. I think now people really in front offices believe that there's another number 8 Florida out there. And so if you're Pittsburgh, if you're only 2 points out on March 8th, you keep Gensel as your own rental, because if we get in and he's a playoff monster, he always has been, we'll go knock off whoever, Rangers or Boston. And I know you're going to say, well, no, I don't think Pittsburgh's going to beat those teams. Okay, well, 135-point Boston lost last year. I don't know.
Right.
I mean, so this thinking I've really picked up on the last couple of weeks, MJ, about both teams at the top and the teams in the bubble seemingly agreeing that it's as wide open as it's ever been. And I'm trying to process in my mind if that's going to impact March 8th. And I got to think if everyone thinks it's a wide open field, that it probably affects the sellers more than anyone. Like, in other words, why am I mortgaging such a big piece of our future if it's almost a flip of a coin in every playoff series?
Right. And maybe the idea of that old rental sticks around. Now, maybe to tie that in, another team that's on the bubble, New Jersey. Tom Fitzgerald gets a 3-year extension. So just thoughts on getting a GM signed for a team that's sort of underachieving, but also maybe tied into Calgary. Like Jacob Markstrom didn't have a great game last night against St. Louis as we tape this on Wednesday. But, could that be a fit for a guy like Markstrom? Like, is Jersey in the market to get a goaltender, get Jack Hughes healthy, hopefully after the trade deadline, and make a run or after the All-Star break and make a run, because they have sort of underachieved this year with a ton of injuries and goaltending issues?
Yeah, MJ, I think they're in the market, and they have been for a long time now, for both a goalie and a D. Calgary has screamed blockbuster package to me the whole time, where can you convince Jacob Markstrom to waive? Can you convince the Flames to trade him? He's got a full no move, and include Tanev or Hanifin in that deal, and you get everything taken care of if you're the Devils in that deal, and not just for this year, but in the case of Markstrom, you kind of solve things in goal for a couple of years. I mentioned this name last week, which surprised a lot of people. It surprised me when I got wind of it, but UC Saros, I think very quietly, they're just saying, because we know what publicly Barry Trotz has said, that they intend to extend him this summer, which I believe is still, the most likely outcome. But I think what has happened is there are so many teams in dire need of a goalie upgrade that the Predators have said, we're not doing our job if we don't let teams call and just say, here's what we'd be willing to do. So I think those conversations are starting to happen. Again, I think Saros probably stays put. He's got a year and a half left on his contract. Askarov has been playing really well in Milwaukee. So it's an interesting position. And my point is, going back to New Jersey, and frankly, I'll throw Carolina in there. Carolina is they're so close, but could goaltending cost them? And I don't know. Like, I'd be all over all those teams trying to find a solution.
Yeah.
Saros to me is
those
a
are big
top
names.
5 goalie in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not having a good year this year. And I wonder how much
numbers are down.
The pending contract extension is maybe weighing on him. Maybe some of the conversation that he might be available in some capacity might be weighing on him. These guys are human. They hear it. They know it. And maybe that's affecting his confidence a little bit. But we'll see. If you had a Markstrom into Carolina or a Saros into Jersey for a couple of years, like that changes the complexion of pretty good teams in a major way in the world you're talking about, where it's open to maybe anyone to go on a deep run. So we'll see how aggressive those teams are. And all right, Pierre, one other bubble team that made some news. We haven't talked to you about this yet. Patrick Roy back in the NHL. I don't know. Lou, of course, pulls it off quietly in a very stealth-like manner. I always say this. If Patrick Roy's name was John Smith, and he had coached in the NHL, won the Coach of the Year, he left, however he left, went back and coached in junior for a decade, ran a team, won Memorial Cups, that guy would be the top coaching prospect in the world. The fact that it's Patrick Roy doesn't change the fact that his path has led him to warrant another shot in the NHL. Now, what I like the most about his introductory presser, Pierre, is that part of Patrick Roy's demeanor early in Colorado was that he was still larger than life. And he was still part of management, as he was part of management, involved in roster shaping. And he just, he sounded almost humbled by his time away, matured, maybe reflective and sort of wiser for his time away. And if he brings that with the acumen and the passion, I would expect him to be a pretty good NHL coach today. League's always better when Patrick Roy's back in it. Do you like this from the Islanders, the timing of it? Are they trying to salvage this year? Like, what are they doing with Patrick Roy? Why now?
They are trying to salvage this year, absolutely. The roster is the roster. I think there's some flaws in that roster, so we'll see. Patrick Roy's a great coach, and so that part, I don't have doubts about that part. I did have some doubts when the announcement was made Saturday about how much he's been paying attention to the NHL game, to the detail of trends and different systems. And I was told by another NHL head coach who had talked to him over the past year, he's on top of it. And so, I think that's a chance to be good. And, I thought it was great. I reached out to Joe Sakic that night, and we know how things ended in Colorado in 2016. And Joe Sakic, genuinely, you could hear in his voice, was thrilled for his old pal. And, and they're fine now. In fact, they hung out of Hall of Fame weekend in Toronto. They hung out together. The late Pierre Lacroix was going in, and Patrick and Joe could be seen everywhere. He was genuinely happy that Patrick Roy got another shot to coach in the NHL. You could hear that in Joe Sakic's voice. And listen, you covered a lot of it, MJ, but really the key here is Patrick Roy hurt himself for a long time. When I would talk to front offices, they were concerned that he had an official stake in Colorado in management with a management title, but that they worried even if they didn't give him one, that he would try and veer himself into that if they hired him. And that was always something that I would hear from NHL front offices. It's really good to hear Patrick Roy say over the last year, I now realize you can't either coach or you're in management. You can't do both. It took him a long time to get there, I will tell you.
And he's in the right organization, Pierre.
Well, he's not going to have to take Lou Lamoriello. Yeah,
roll into Lou's office. Hey, Lou, I want a forward for my third line. Lou's like, get out of here. Go coach the team. Right? He's in the right spot.
But I'll tell you what this could do. Like, even if he doesn't turn around the Islanders and the Islanders, in 2 years from now, have to go a whole different path, whether that means new GM and rebuild it, whatever. I think what this does, though, honestly, if you really want to go bigger picture, this might set up Patrick Roy now for the next job or two. He's back. So now he might be back in a way where other teams are like, oh, man, I can't wait till his time in Long Island to be over because I want to get in on that. That's what I predict will happen.
Right. And just for the record, I know you're curious, Pierre. The Quizmaster dug it out. I did score one goal against Patrick Roy. So I got one
I'm not surprised by that.
With Colorado when I was playing in Arizona. So I got one on him, which I will take. Also worth noting, tomorrow night, Islanders at Montreal. Should be an electric atmosphere. Do you think it'll be just like a shower, like just outpouring of love for Patrick Roy by the Montreal fans?
I think he'll be pretty positive in terms of his reception. He's still an absolute god there. And it's interesting, by the way, Lou Lamoriello, and I can't believe I've never asked him this over the years, but he loves former Habs legends. I mean, Larry Robinson coached a Stanley Cup team for him in New Jersey, Jacques Lemaire, the late Pat Burns, Claude Julien. A lot of former Habs end up coaching for Lou Lamoriello. So just saying, interestingly.
There we go. Well, a lot of success in Montreal to try to emulate. Maybe he's trying to do that. One more thought around the league before we get to our own version of red card, yellow card, no card to end the show. Adin Hill back for Vegas. Bruce Cassidy, some strong words after a tough loss a couple games ago. Beer league hockey, preseason hockey, unacceptable. Adin Hill comes back. They've been missing him. When he's been healthy, he's been as good as anybody in the league. Does he turn Vegas around? I think he probably does. And if the Olympic team was being picked for Canada today, is he your starter?
I knew you were going to go there. I guess he kind of has to be, right?
Has to be. Yeah.
I mean, he won the cup. His numbers, and good for him because, let's be honest, I mean, you know, a lot of people were like, yeah, well, behind that blue line, any of their 5 goalies could have won the cup, which, by the way, could have been true.
Maybe, yeah.
But he was still tremendous last spring under pressure when there were moments where, you know, especially coming in the way he did in the Edmonton series. But the point I'm getting at is I think people were waiting for him to fall back this year because it was like, okay, he caught lightning in a bottle. Well, no, I mean, when he's been healthy this year, early in the year, and now he's back, but his numbers are spectacular. So, yes,
yeah.
The answer is
11-2-2, 193, 935. Return with a 40 save performance and a win against the Islanders. He's back, baby, and maybe Vegas is as well. So that wraps it up here for our tour around the league. And before we run too long, you and I chatting away like we're on the dock in the summer, we have to do our favorites, the red card, yellow card, no card. Terry Ryan's too busy playing pro hockey and on a whirlwind PR tour to help us out. So it's just going to be me
awesome
as the arbiter of all things cardish. Okay, so an amazing sequence in Arizona the other night where Pittsburgh scored on their own net with the goalie out. Chris Letang drops it back to Evgeny Malkin. Malkin sort of mishandles it, and it goes in his own net. After the game, Chris Letang, obviously frustrations are brewing. He says, I should know better, I guess. I guess I'll learn from that with a little bit of tone. And then he says again, well, if you look at what I did, my pass was going in the corner. I guess I should know better than do something like that with a little bit of tone. So I'm going to say red card, yellow card, no card was Chris Letang sewering his teammate, his longtime teammate, Evgeny Malkin, with his comments post-game after the dreaded own goal.
I'm going to give him a yellow because I think that's what I read too in that quote. But the reason I'm not giving him a red, MJ, is because Malkin apparently did not come out and talk to the media. And I get that he's not done a lot of media over the years. It's one of the many reasons he loves playing behind Sidney Crosby. But I think that's a red flag, frankly, on Evgeny Malkin. Like, that's a brutal moment. May come back to haunt you. Maybe the Penguins don't recover from this. You got to come out and talk to there's probably just 2 or 3, media that traveled on this road trip with Pittsburgh. You should be talking to them and explaining what happened there. So yellow on Letang, red on Malkin.
Wow. Just grabbing extra cards, throwing them out there. I like it. Okay, I'm with you. Everybody gets a card, Oprah. I'm going to say yellow. Yellow for Letang, because generally speaking, you should always take the high road. Never give it to a teammate in the media. Even if you want to give it to him privately, go ahead. But in the media, you're like, you know what, bad play, whatever. But I get the frustration. I get it was a brutal game for Pittsburgh. They looked no good against Arizona. And he's right. He did pass it in the corner. It wasn't his fault. The guy who tried to handle the pass, who's going to the Hall of Fame, it was his fault to win the net. So don't ask me about it. It's not my problem. I put it in the corner. It's his problem. So I give him a yellow card as well. We're on the same page. I'm not giving out any extra reds except for Ryan Rishaug. Red for pulling up lame to host his own pod because, I don't know, he's under the weather or something. So he left it to you and I. But we did what we had to do, Pierre. We got through the whole thing. And that, with a couple of yellow cards, will end this edition of the Got Your Back podcast, NHL edition, with Pierre LeBrun, Mike Johnson, no Ryan Rishaug. We will see you next time.
A+ for MJ.